Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Nitai para WARP Talks. El día de hoy tuvimos la oportunidad de platicar con Röyksopp acerca de su nuevo disco y ciencia ficción, así como sus influencias tempranas. Espero que la disfruten.
There we go.
Oh, hello there.
Hiya.
Hello.
I was just reminded of this book over here because of your name.
There you go.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes. Really, it's possibly
This?
a favorite movie.
We
It
believe
is?
that the author claims that the letters HAL, it's coincidence that they are adjacent to the letters IBM in the alphabet.
Oh, that's very clever. I didn't know that. I've actually never watched the film, but I coincidentally stumbled into 2010.
Oh yeah, but
And I'm about to begin. 2001, yeah. I finished this quite recently and I had such a nice time reading this. I have to confess I've never watched the film because someone said you should really read the book before you go in and watch the film because this is more concise.
Or 2001.
I've got both. I've got 2001 and 2010. This I
the
finished.
person said that you shouldn't watch the film meant 2001 or 2010.
I think they meant 2001 because that's where you begin, right?
All right, yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's the first one. That's Stanley Kubrick in 1969, I believe. Whereas 2010 is not something you need to watch, but matter of taste and all that stuff.
Nice.
There's also a book called 3001.
There is also the 3001? So it's a trilogy?
That book is amazing in my view.
Oh, I'm gonna scavenge for it in that case. I've just been really lucky and I've stumbled into them at thrift shops. I think what gave me goosebumps about the second Space Odyssey is how many coincidences came out to be true about the way they told these stories, how the ones we finally moon landed were matching up with what Arthur C. Clarke was envisioning in his head.
I think you'll find that with quite a lot of science fiction. Some of them, not all, but the elite few.
Some are spookily right about a lot of things, but the vast majority is obviously very wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not really a competition about being right. I mean, the genre of science fiction, of course. But it's funny when people are.
Arthur C. Clarke and I guess Isaac Asimov should be mentioned as well, I guess.
Definitely.
Anyway.
I'm yet to dive into Isaac Asimov. I think I have a book by him somewhere, but I've gotten more from my sister, my younger sister. Anyway, I'm sorry. Didn't expect you to be here earlier. My name is Nitai, and I've got Oscar here with us. And
Yep.
I want to ask you some questions. Specifically, I want to start with your childhood, because as I understand, you met up when you were pre-teens through a friend. Was his name Gotti?
Yeah, that's the Norwegian pronunciation would be Gaute, but yeah, that's the guy. True.
Not to forgive my pronunciation. I've actually studied some Norwegian, but I'm very much afraid of your additional vowels. I can pronounce the A with a little O on top because I'm a Spanish speaker, and that's the same as O, so it makes a lot of sense for us. But
exactly.
I hope I don't butcher your names during this.
No. Don't sweat it. It's all good, and I didn't mean to be impertinent or impolite.
No, not at all. I appreciate the correction. I would like to ask you about your childhood memories. I recall that you met when you were young kids, but you did go your separate ways for some years, and you didn't meet back up until you were in your 20s?
Well, yeah, it's separate ways. It sounded as if we were falling out or something like that. But there is an age difference. Torbjörn is 1 year older than me. So after we finished school, I guess it's fair to say that Torbjörn, well, you can tell your story, I can tell mine, but I had to do military service, which was then obligatory in Norway when you're 18. So I did military service on my part. So after that was finished, we met up again. So there's no like falling out or any drama. And I guess you can tell your story. So
yeah, the period is quite short when you look back at it. It's like 1 year plus a few months.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been friends and working together ever since we were kids. We met up, and one of the first things that we knew that we wanted was to get our hands on some music equipment, which was quite hard to get a hold of back in the day.
This is obviously in the sort of the late 80s, mid to late 80s when we met. So it's quite some time ago.
And ever since we've been working together, playing together.
Playing together. That's one thing that comes to mind when I think about Röyksopp, is how it really seems like child's play. It just seems like you've been having tons of fun since you were teenagers, and like the creative process behind each album is just sitting together, having some wild banter, and coming out with an album. But do you ever, as actual work?
I just want to hook on to what you just said, because that's brilliant. And the worst, to flip it around, the worst thing that could happen is if you listen to a piece of music and your first comment is, wow, that must have been a lot of work. Then I think the musician has kind of failed. Right?
Yeah.
It is actually time consuming to make music the way that we do it. We don't make it easy on ourselves, and we continue to challenge ourselves. Not just something we're saying, we really do. We change it up all the time and try to come up with new sounds, new ideas. But we only succeed when it sounds like it was easy to make. That's kind of a little stamp that we want to have on our music. It should sound like it flows out easily.
And we are, as human beings, and also it's nice if it's reflected in the music. We are fairly playful as human beings. It's got to be fun, and I think we have succeeded to maintain a childlike, inquisitive temper, being curious, being inquisitive, wanting to try things out, and then it becomes more playful and whimsical and fun, really. Although, as Torbjörn says, it's hard labor, but it's fun labor, we think.
Do you find any part of that labor tedious?
Some bits can be tedious. I think, for instance, to be very technical, going through record takes of, if something, particularly when we were younger, we would record many takes, like of, let's say, I don't know, a guitar. We play a guitar, and you take several like record tapes, and then you have to re-listen through and compare and go back and forth which one is the better. That was particularly when we were younger and a bit more inexperienced, tedious. And it's, we don't do that anymore. We try to be more strict with what we record and also what we keep, so we don't have to do those kind of tedious, mundane tasks.
Music production has really gotten a lot less tedious. If we look back on the programming of early electronic music, in order to get some any sort of musical flourish, if you will, took like a day, because you had to program every little value, like one value per 128th of a bar. And then on the second 128th, you need to change the value and go through the whole bar to make some sort of filter rise. That was more tedious than now.
And also, in addition, still we use a lot of outboard hardware, obviously, in our production, which also can be, tricky. It's a bit more
unreliable.
Unreliable, exactly, in comparison to software in your computer. And Torbjörn also mentioned the programming values in your computer. This is sounding very back in the day, but there was a time where, you know, the MIDI clock would be highly unstable. The more MIDI you fed your computer, the slower actually the BPM would become. So you had to sort of balance out to not overfeed your computer with MIDI, because then the BPM would actually drop midway through the song. And often that would be in the chorus, for instance. So you had a verse going at 120 BPM, and then the chorus pops in, and you have, you know, a lot of MIDI coming in, and then the BPM drops 2 BPMs. That's very unmusical, most people will find. So you had those kind of things, which is not an issue anymore. But I think it's fun for us to have being part of that I don't know, that struggle.
Coming technology early on.
Yes.
Machinery. I like that you hold on to your machinery. Probably the part that makes it easier now is post-production, where you just run it through the computer and you're able to clean it up much more easily than manually working on the machines. Nice.
Well, we are very much about the digits, dials, and knobs and levers, and, you know, hands-on. That's where we're at our best, I think.
I think about you as kids and how...
I have to change chair. It makes so much noise.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. I can't hear it at all. But
okay.
I hear this over and over, how you've gotten into music, but it was merely out of boredom, because it could have been anything else. You could have gotten into being a woodsmith, pottery, but you decided to go and ask for these pieces of equipment, of musical, really expensive pieces of musical equipment, when you were really young boys, with the help of someone older. I assume this finally played out, and that's why we've got Röyksopp today.
Kind of. It has to be said that the person whom we used as a beard in order to borrow this equipment was the same age as us, or the same age as Torbjörn, but he looked as if he was an adult. Matter of factly, he was like 14, I think, but he looked like he was possibly at least 18 or 20. He was really tall, still is obviously, but he looked like a grown-up man. So we pushed him forward, and he was a bit shy and embarrassed, so he kept sort of quiet when borrowing the equipment for us, and himself obviously. So that's kind of one way of getting our hands on more equipment. We had already at that point bought our own synthesizers and little bits and bobs, but we didn't. Equipment was so expensive. Obviously, if you're 12, you don't have money to spend. And back in the day, pre-internet, pre that kind of software, pre-everything, things were so different. It was all about getting your reverbs, your delays, your compressors, your whatever, mixers. It had to be outboard, and they were ridiculously expensive in the 80s.
And there's a reason why, I guess, at least as a theory, there's a reason why so many of the early pioneers of electronic music were kind of already rich people.
Yeah.
Because even before that, because we were meeting up at a time when equipment became slightly more affordable. So there was a time even before that where it costs like a year's salary to buy some sort of the best of the best in electronic equipment. And so if you look around and read up, you might find that many of the pioneers of electronic music either already had a fortune or came from some sort of money.
And I just want to add also that we, just to quote Pet Shop Boys, because we were never being boring in any way. We were never feeling bored, just to continue with the chorus of Pet Shop Boys. We just sought, we were seeking impulses. We had so much we wanted to do. Now, again, this is in our native town of Tromsø, up in northern Norway, in the 80s. And if you have a map in front of you, you'll find that it's quite remote. It's a remote little place. And again, like an old man, I have to say this is pre-internet, so there were limitations to what you can get. There was the one state channel on TV, that was it. And there weren't that many impulses to draw on, but we had a vivid imagination and a desire and willingness to create. So we were not only making music, we were also making movies with each other. We were taking a lot of photos, and we were very active in traveling nature and riding our bikes whenever we could. So I think boredom is perhaps not the right word for us. More a willingness to explore, as opposed to we're not the kind of people to sit down and just stare at the empty wall. We needed action. We needed to do stuff.
What do you think about today's youth? Do you think that we're overstimulated and perhaps under
the chemistry of brains of young people are probably different than the chemistry of our brains when we grew up. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing, I don't think it's too early to say. We will probably see the results of that when young people grow up and see maybe they become even better adults than the generation we represent. So that's not for me at least to speculate in, but that it is different being a youth today with the amount of stimulus. That is beyond question, of course.
Obviously, there's no evolutionary paradigm that has happened since the 80s, but I guess what you're saying is, as you progress from birth and into your teens, whatever, if you are not feeding or, if you're not being bored, but always stimulated, that might be not good for the chemical balance within your brain, really. Looking at the blue screen and the blue light, constantly needing the urge or the impulse to be entertained by not only one source, but 2 or 3 or 4.
The quick but very weak dopamine fix.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Sorry for laughing. It was, It was the most polite cough I've ever heard, I think. Sorry.
I'd like to treat you to some tea, but I'm afraid you're too far away.
Yes. Well, we got some thing here.
Very well. Did any of your parents introduce you to music themselves, or were they involved in a line of work that had to do with electrodomestics, anything like an electric technician? Because I see this with a lot of artists, that their parents have some sort of finesse for fixing electronic devices, and these kids, they really like to pick apart these electronic devices, understand how they work, and I don't know why, but I've seen that turn into really brilliant musicians sometime.
Well, obviously we don't have the same parents, so I guess we have to take turns.
I didn't really get into the music of my parents. However, my dad did something really nice for me, because he knew that I was interested in sound from a very early stage. So he decided to build a small synthesizer when we were kids. And I just remember him, doing all the small electronic stuff. And at some point, he said, well, now if I press this screwdriver onto here, it's now a radio. And we could get radio AM signals into the thing. And he worked in it a little bit more, and it became a monophonic synthesizer. And I was quite a small boy, but that made a big impression on me. So yes, my dad is a technically minded person, for sure.
Yeah, and I didn't have that, but my parents at the very early stage they were really good at nourishing, mine and my siblings' need to explore. So I know that my parents introduced me to instruments when I was really like tiny, like a preschool thing, and also they also saw my interest in particularly the record player, the vinyl player. So my dad would just allow me to go in there and have his best chair and the headphones and listen to all his records, mistreating them like shit and putting them on the 78 RPM and sort of a early scratching and so on. So I were at liberty to destroy all his Elvis and Beatles and Neil Young records at a very early age. And as far as parents go, spurte hun om utdannelse, eller sa hun noe? Jeg husker ikke. Did you ask about their jobs? I've forgotten what you...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, my mom is a doctor and my dad is a... well, what would be the English word? He's like a teacher. He's like the teacher for teachers. And I've forgotten the English word, but affiliated to the university. Yeah. So doctor and I guess.
We call that in Spanish pedagogía, and I found that a lot of words in Spanish actually resonate in Norwegian. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. But I think pedagogía is what you mean. That's really cool. I've actually been reading up a book about an alternative way of educating children. It was a school founded by a psychologist called Summerhill. Have you ever heard about it?
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't.
It rings a bell. Does he have a method? Is it called the Summerhill method or something like that? I don't know.
More than a method, he believes in freedom, and he's got a lot of faith in children being just, being responsible, and just needing to be relieved from the moralistic binds of society to develop as happy beings. And he defines success as simply being able to work any job you choose, but being happy while doing it. Like, so all of these standards that we have about success, about getting into college and getting a post degree and all of this, it's brushed off the table. If this person is going to be happy, sweeping the street.
Is it similar to the teachings of Rudolf Steiner? Is it that? Like
no, actually Alexander Sutherland Neal. But I think it might be a byproduct of those initial philosophies.
Yeah.
Well, it's curious that you say that, because we spoke a little bit about our upbringing and parents, and one thing that was common between our sets of parents was the support and I guess belief that if we followed what we wanted to do, that was the right thing to do. We didn't. Yes, that kind of support really made it easier for us to choose the paths that we've chosen.
Yeah, I can definitely say, and I've seen that with Torbjørn as well, that both our parents or sets of parents indeed were enablers in that they allowed us access to whatever we wanted in terms of playing music in our others' houses, which
must have been annoying.
Which must have been extremely annoying. We were, boosting our sense and exploring, because obviously we didn't have any particular teaching in it. So, we had to find the way as we went along. So that must have been like 10 years of annoyance for them, I guess. So, yeah.
Brilliant. I like that. I like that about Röyksopp. I like that it is definitely a childlike project, and you can still hear it. And you can hear it in your very early recordings, and it's still there. But there's definitely something that has changed. It has become more polished and mature. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think mature, I think yes. I think polished is a bit of a tricky word for me, but if you use perhaps more refined or something, because polished sounds like slick R&B to me. As if we have taken out the we haven't cleaned up the sonic soundscapes to the extent where there is no sort of flaws and so on, because we love all the the unpolished flaws of hissing noises and humming and crackles and whatnot. We that's why we use all this old analog equipment, simply because they have the little micro detuning and those kind of things. So I'm not sure whether we're more polished, but we might be more refined and more focused, I guess.
I can see though how where it's coming from, especially if you look at part 1 of Profound Mysteries, that there is some sort of shininess to every surface in that music that wasn't really that present earlier.
That might be true.
It's a little bit more reflective, if you want. So
no,
that's probably makes for a more, I guess, mature sound as well. That's not the only outlet that we have, though. We still enjoy the sort of a little bit more direct and dirty, shabby mixes and the rawness. So we have that outlet as well. But especially for part 1 of Profound Mysteries, yes, it's a little bit of a it's our sort of way back into the consciousness of the world, and so that's done on purpose.
And I think also perhaps and this is becoming very technical, but some of the things we do now is perhaps a bit more balanced as opposed to what we did 15 years ago in terms of how we engineer stuff. It's not necessarily as tilted in any direction. It's a bit more balanced. But I think if I'm to point towards a track of recent, sorry for the text coming in, the track which is the opening track on part 2, which is called Denim Clad Baboons, that to me is a clear sort of direct line towards what we did with the Melody AM and so on. It's very analog, dirty, playful, and it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's supposed to convey that energy of youth more than anything, a sort of carefree spirit, if you want. So the playfulness is still there, and the sort of unpolished Röyksopp is still there. We haven't departed from that, I think. It's just, as Tone said, more of a mix now between different expressions.
Thank you. I was actually listening to your monthly songs that you used to post about 10 years ago, and there was some outtakes from Melody AM and talks about a legendary album out there called Jesudas. Could you tell us a little bit about Jesudas?
Well, you are one of the few people in the world who knows and cares about this project, which makes you very special and dear to us. Thank you. We also like that, and we like the current state where it's just floating around like some creature that was never released. That's the way, at least I like it to be. It's there if you can find it.
Let me just keep on talking. I'll show you something just for a split second.
Have you heard any of the music that was on it?
Well, I would like to get my hands on the track list, at least to see what's in it. I listened to Stronghold, and I noticed there was a double bass line in it that was extremely jazzy. And I think that's the one distinctive trait of the Melody AM, is that it's really jazzy.
I just wanted to show you this. Like, you see this? This is a box of so-called DAT tapes. See this? Digital audio tapes. This is all, they have music on them. This is all music that we have made over the years that haven't been released. So we have a lot of stuff that we made over the years, and many of these things we just make for the sake of making it, because it's what we do. We like to make music. So to us, Jesudas is one of those things, something we've done, and it's there, possibly somewhere in here. But it's like making a drawing. You make the drawing for whatever reason, and then you move on. We have that with music, and some of it is in this box, and we have many of those. So
Are those the lost tapes?
Yeah, lost tapes. Some of the lost tapes come from here. That is true. So we have a lot to go on.
Well, hopefully someday there'll be a listening party, and I'll be lucky enough to it's probably only floating around in Norway, in Tromsø. You're currently in Bergen, correct?
That's perfectly true.
And what made you both choose to move from Tromsø to Bergen?
I moved to Oslo first, and then I realized that my brother-in-law lived in Bergen. He said that the scene, as it were, at the time, was really vibrant and caring and loving in Bergen. And that made me interested. So I just came over here and I said to Svein, this is the place to be.
And this was the time, around the time I was finished pretending to playing war for the National Service of Norway. So yeah, we decided to meet up here.
And it was a special time that is dear to our hearts, what went on in Bergen at that specific time in the 90s, where there was a lot of creative force floating around, as opposed to the other type of creativity that doesn't find an outlet. A lot of people were actually doing stuff. It felt like everyone was a doer. Sweet.
And yeah, and personally, I have family ties to this. My dad was born here and had his first years as a child in Bergen, so I had that as well. And my older brother was living here as well at the time. So there were many reasons putting us to Bergen, and it's a beautiful town.
I think you live in the same town as Aurora. Have you ever considered a collaboration with Aurora?
Well, it's one of those things. She lives, or she might have moved now. I think she actually lives in Oslo, but she comes from just outside Bergen. That is correct. A place called Os, which is like 45 minutes outside of Bergen. But it's one of those things where we have that thing. If a collaboration is too obvious to us, like it's one of those things that might be conceived as, at least of now, a bit obvious that we would work together because we reside in the same place, and one can easily see us sort of intertwining somehow musically. And for us, no diss to her in any way, shape, or form. But if it's too easy and too obvious. Mm-hmm. We just feel like we need to do something else. Again, that thing with giving ourselves a bit of a challenge, I guess. And no disrespect to Aurora in any way, shape, or form. It's just one of those things. But who knows?
So, that was honestly more of a personal question. I was just wondering if you want to find it out. I wanted to ask you, respectively, what do you enjoy the most about working with each other?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe I need to think a bit because I want to give a good answer.
I can start and give a poor answer.
Yeah, you do that, and I'll give a good answer.
Exactly. We changed that up. Well, it has to be said that Torbjørn and I, our friendship started before we became, musical partners. So the friendship is always there, and I don't really know what makes a good friendship, but I know what I get with Torbjørn, because I get someone who's I find funny, interesting, creative, loyal, all these things that I appreciate and that I would want in a friend. We have that, or I feel we have that at the core. It's still fun to sit here and in a safe space and just chat about whatever we chat about, knowing that it's never going to leave the room, and it's funny, and it's in essence it's what this album is all about, the profound mysteries. Torbjørn and I can sit and talk about things that might only be interesting to us for a brief second, and then we have talked about it and it's gone, and that's very rewarding to me. I treasure that a lot. It doesn't really answer. I cannot list one quality other than what I just said: funny, reflective, and or reflective, I guess, and creative, things that I admire.
Well, thank you. That was really kind of you.
I was a lie as well.
Kind lie.
You also lied about releasing a metal album.
What? Sorry?
Vane, at some point you gave us the expectation that your next album was actually going to be heavy metal. You never delivered.
No, I know, but
Another one of his sweet lies.
Yes, I'm a, what you call it, a mythomaniac, I believe.
Yeah.
It's called mythomaniac. Yeah. But apart from my mythomaniaism, we're still young, so there's plenty of time to do heavy metal. And I like the fact that it's heavy metal, not black metal, but heavy metal, which is, even better. There's plenty of more stuff for us to explore musically, I think.
And that's probably my cue to answer your question, because therein lies something. What I enjoy about working with Svein is the never-ending sort of energy. It's like he makes me feel, and hopefully I can give some back to him, that it's just not gonna run out. And Svein is obviously extremely funny and a very intelligent and good-looking man.
Right back at you.
I don't really know. There's so many superlatives I could list, but I'd say that the fun part is definitely what's kept us going. When other parts of real life is hard, it's really healthy for my mind to be able to go in with Svein and just do the things that we've always done and that we still enjoy, even perhaps more than in the beginning.